Hi there. Hi there. My name's Maria Morris, and I am the JMG specialist at Morse High School in Bath, Maine. JMG is an educational nonprofit that partners between public schools and businesses to support students with barriers to graduating and oh wow and to graduating high school, earning post-secondary credentials, and pursuing a meaningful career. So essentially, the work that I do is I teach students transferable skills, and we do some career development, leadership development, career planning, and exploration. Um, and I'm also a Fulbright teacher for Global Classrooms participant. And so I'm really looking for ways um, to connect um, the SDGs with careers and just raising awareness and kind of going beyond the obvious with my students. So that was a very long explanation, and I apologize.
And Sarah's written in the chat that she's in a really loud place, but she's an intern for Project Inside Out, which is an educational nonprofit for individuals to improve their climate activism. I got to speak with your founder yesterday briefly on LinkedIn, so great to have you here. Who would like to go next?
I can go. My name is Anjali Gadwani. I am the Director of Design for Change USA, and I'm joined here with my colleague Andy, and he's going to be doing a lot of sharing about our program today and our partnership with the Climate Initiative. But I am based in Boston normally. Right now I'm dialing in from Alberta, Canada, where we're visiting my in-laws. Just came back from spending a couple days in the mountains, so it was beautiful in Banff. So really nice to meet you all, and I'm excited to dig in here.
Since I work with Anjali, I'll just go next. I'm Andy Lundquist. I'm the Director for Community Engagement at Design for Change. I'll be doing a good amount of speaking on what we do and how we've partnered with the Climate Initiative, and then also how you can use a lot of our work in your classrooms to further the SDGs, and especially the ones that are related to climate and environmental justice.
So I'm Leah Lowry. I'm the Director of Programs and Outreach and co-founder of TCI. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit later about some of our brief programming, but I'm going to keep it short because I think what Julie has to offer as somebody who's actually used it is valuable. So I want to make sure she has plenty of time to talk.
Sarah or Anissa, would you like to go next? I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name.
No, you're good. I'm actually a high school student that's interested in environmental science. So since I had this opportunity, I just wanted to get like a behind the scenes look of what environmental education looks like.
Thank you for joining. It's great to have your perspective. Now, Sarah's written in the chat that Sarah is a high school bioenvironmental AP teacher in Maryland, used bits and pieces of TCI last spring, and I'm looking to use more. Well, thank you all for joining, and this recording will also be made available afterwards, so you can share it with any colleagues or in your networks, and we'll also be sharing on ours. My name is Pooja Tulawala. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm based in Bensalem, PA, USA, and I'm the Youth Engagement Manager at the Climate Initiative. I joined in 2020, and it's been awesome working with the TCI team since then. So today we're going to dive into our presentation now. Let me just share my screen real quick. Okay. Move this over. Okay, are you able to see anything in the way, or can you see the slide perfectly fine?
You're good.
Okay, perfect. All right, so thank you all for joining us today. Design for Change USA is a global organization with educational tools for teachers to introduce social action projects to students so they can solve the world's biggest problems. They design resources to help students become stronger thinkers and center programming on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. The Climate Initiative is a growing organization with educational tools for educators to empower youth for climate action across the US and overseas. We focus on educating, empowering, and activating youth for climate action in their local communities, framing our work with 3 lenses: economic, ecological, and sociocultural. Today, we'll learn about various resources by Design for Change USA and the Climate Initiative, which are available to educators, learners, and anyone interested in advancing social issues in their community through education and action. After both organizations have the chance to share, we will open the floor to a Q&A. So I'm going to hand it over to Andrew to present. And apologies if I said Andy. I think I may have said Andy by accident.
No, I go by Andy, and I'm just now realizing on Zoom it says Andrew, and it feels
Okay.
far too formal.
So I didn't make that
Actually,
up. I'm glad. Thanks.
Before I start, I will actually invite Sanjali to say anything to kind of kick us off, and then I'll kind of walk through what we do at Design for Change.
Great.
Fantastic. And I do call him Andy. I don't think I've ever said Andrew, but thank you all so much for having us here today. Design for Change, as was already mentioned, is a global movement, and our work here in the US is really to contextualize the program to a US audience and really think about what educators in the US as well as students and communities are grappling with at this time. There's so much going on in our world, and climate needs to be a big focus of that. And so we were really grateful to partner with the Climate Initiative and to offer a way for students to think about climate change in a way that they can actually take action around it. So sourcing voices that Andy is going to be talking about, and really inspiring young people to really take climate change seriously as they do, and make sure that they feel like they have a voice and are empowered to do good in the world. So that is our work at Design for Change, and Andy will be going through much more of it in greater detail. But thank you so much for having us, and we're looking forward to further exploring ways that we'll continue to partner with TCI.
All right, let's go ahead and get into it. So Pooja was mentioning it earlier about how we've divided up this presentation. Design for Change, we'll talk a little bit about our curriculum, our connection to TCI, and all of the online resources that are available on our website, especially as they relate to environmental justice. And then after that, Climate Initiative will take on over, talk about their online tools, learning labs, and why teachers really need and are called to address climate change and environmental justice in the classroom. Go ahead to the next slide. Little bit on Design for Change. It started out as a global organization, actually based out of India, and then Design for Change USA was created to accommodate all of the different schools that really wanted to participate in this work in our country. So in addition to the US, we are in over 70 countries. There's way more than 40,000 stories of change, and 70,000 teachers and counting participate in our work. So a little bit later today, I will invite you to join our online platform. I'll send a link and make sure that you can get easily signed up, and you already, just by signing up, will have access to a lot of our lesson plans and examples in the past. I'll even show you one where we partnered with TCI students to create a podcast. A little bit about me. In addition to working for Design for Change, I am a high school educator. I'm going in my 14th year as a high school educator. And it was about 7 years ago that Sanjali actually came to my school and gave a professional development workshop. And ever since then, I've been working with students using this process. And I cannot begin to tell you how much I am blown away every year by what a project starts out as and what students evolve their project into. So just a few samples or pictures down there at the bottom. Our very first one in the bottom left was one addressing human trafficking. In the middle, how Seattle was to focus on its population of people that were facing homelessness. And then off to the far right, we had a group that was working with sexual harassment and assault that was actually invited to participate in Design for Change Global Conference. So if you try to do this work with your students, there is a good chance that in submitting your project at the end of the year, letting us know the stories of change that you made, you could be invited to the global conference for that year. And I will actually be sharing a little bit later on a project that was specifically focused on environmental justice that is going to our global conference this year, just so that you know that is something we continue to do and continue to participate in. Next slide. So a lot of our work at Design for Change is an educational curriculum that is broken up essentially into 4 basic steps: feel, imagine, do, and share. And I could talk on and on about each of these steps, but today I want to keep it brief. I want to give you a very kind of simplified version of what each of these steps are, and I'm going to show you some samples of what goes on inside of each step. At its core, each of these steps kind of go as follows. So feel kicks off every Design for Change process. It is a way of getting students attuned to a particular issue and really trying to empathize with the people who are faced with that issue the most. So students might be stepping outside of their comfort zone, might be stepping outside of their worldview in order to really fully empathize with the people who they want to help. The Imagine stage coming up next, that is all about rapid brainstorming and getting kids to really think outside of the box of what kind of change can they create? What kind of solutions can they generate with the tools and talents that they have available to them? The Do stage, fairly self-explanatory. It's doing the work. It's designing a plan and actually initiating that plan. And then finally, the Share stage is a phenomenal stage that you could not leave off. It is an opportunity for students to share with their school community what they've done, to share with their local community, and of course, share with the Design for Change community. At the end of the year, we get to see all of these great projects all year long, and we do invite some to participate in the global conference, but we also award grants to the top 3 projects that we feel like have created the most change and are so inspiring to future change makers that have been happening that year. Okay, so next slide. I heard somebody earlier mention the UN Global Goals, and this is something that we've integrated into a lot of our lesson plans. And the idea here is that teachers can kind of choose a particular focus. And our podcast library, which I will share a sample of on the next slide, every podcast that we put up is connected in some way to a global sustainability goal. And goals 13, 14, 15 are the most relevant to what we're talking about today, relating to climate action, life below water, and life on land. So if you want to click to the next slide, this is actually up on our website. These are 2 students, Lorna and Amelie, and you'll hear from them in just a second, but they are from the Climate Initiative. So we partnered with TCI to make this podcast possible, and this comes kind of in the first stage. We try to get our teachers to use this podcast library that we have available to them to start off the feel stage, the very first stage in the process, where they learn about particular stories. So in this case, you're going to learn from Amelie and Lorna what it's like to be in the path of a wildfire and how that relates to climate change and how it can't be ignored. Otherwise, more and more people are going to be facing what Amelie and Lorna did. So let's hear a little bit about their story. And Pooja, if you see, it's like 3:56. So you can click play and then just kind of like skim
And
on
let
it.
me know if you can't hear it. I might have to reshare screen with like audio, but just let me.
Oh, to introduce the audio.
Mhm.
Oh, you're good.
Good? Okay.
Right by the mountain. So I have to say that Lauren and I both live on the other side of town, which is I think about 10 miles away, and it was moving.
Uh-oh, you muted it with your
Oh,
was,
how?
mic.
Okay.
on the eastern side of the county that our barn was really in danger of getting burned. So I had to start evacuating over 60 horses, and that was really stressful because we're like, what's going to happen? Like, if our farm burns down, what's going to happen? And everything, and like, where are pets going to live, who I think a lot of people consider their pets a part of their family and everything. And I thought that was really scary. I also remember driving down to the farm on the side of their road. It was like complete anarchy. All of the stoplights were out, and there were just cars on fire on the side of the road, and no one was to be found. And there's no law enforcement. There's nothing. There's like no people.
Oh no.
And you would just be like, what happened? Like, what is happening right now?
Yeah, and again, I also didn't have to evacuate, but I've also had to deal with evacuating friends and helping. We have friends that had a lot of pets and trying to fit them all into our home. They had like, we have a chicken coop, but they brought like 20 chickens with them in cardboard boxes and like 4 dogs, and just like, oh my gosh, like what do we do with this? And this was a past fire, this isn't the most recent one, but yeah, just like, I don't know, like also, I don't know, my mom has a bin of important photographs like ready to go in case we ever would have to evacuate for whatever reason. But I think there was just also a lot of conversations after the Marshall Fire specifically, like within our friend group even, of like, what would you bring if you have 15 minutes to evacuate?
With this fire, I think the whole community is thinking about, hey, even if we're in the city, a fire could still happen. And the Marshall Fire burst that bubble of thinking that you are safe because you're in a city. Because historically, if you're in the city, the firefighters would do everything, and a fire has never been that detrimental.
All right, you can go ahead and pause it right here and just move on to the next slide. So you can see from that particular slide that if you're starting a project with a group of students who have never been in the path of a wildfire or a tropical storm or anything like that, really, this is an opportunity to hear what it's like to be truly in the path of climate change, to have your house, to have your family threatened. And that's why I love how Amelie brings in the idea of, you know, my mom has this box of stuff like ready to go. And after the podcast, it's a great opportunity to engage students and say, hey, if you were in the path of a wildfire or some sort of climate disaster, what would you bring? And how would your life be affected if you had to leave your home right now? So that's a part of the feel stage to really build some empathy with students. The next stage would be the imagine stage. And each of these sections has a set of lesson plans that teachers can pick and choose from. So I'm only showing you like a little glimpse. And in the imagine stage, it really pushes students to think about what are the root causes of a particular issue? What are the symptoms of the issue? So how might we address ocean acidification in a world where life below land is continually threatened, or where certain products and the amount of availability of certain, you know, fish in our local markets is continually going down because of things like ocean acidification, just to like throw an environmental issue out there. And so this is kind of just a blueprint. Fill in the blanks with your particular issue, do the research. And next up, the do stage I mentioned earlier is a little bit about just putting things to the ground and making a blueprint for what you're going to do. So as soon as students really get the gears turning of what they want to do, sometimes as a teacher, you've got to like pump the brakes because they're really eager to get going. And this is a great lesson where, okay, they've got an action step, and then just putting them in small groups and saying, okay, so you want to do this? Tell me more about that. And the idea is as more explanation is forced for these particular stages, the more fine-tuned details are like all smoothed out so that students really have a clear idea of, okay, what do we need to do to make this action step happen? Who do we need to talk to? What tools do we need? Okay, next slide. And the last step is the share step. And I mentioned that you would share with your school community, the local community, and even the Design for Change community. And one of our grant winners this year, and this is actually a school that we are inviting to the global summit that is happening this year in Malaysia. This is the Stratford School in Santa Clara, California. And this was so cool because it actually involved 3 different grade levels at this school: kindergartners, first graders, second graders. So if you're thinking to yourself, maybe my students are a little too young for this, like, kindergartners are doing this work. And they really wanted to focus on Global Goal 15, life on land. And so they worked together, but on 3 sub goals of this. And they created these recipe books or these ebooks to teach future kids or kids in their community that don't go to this school about food waste, about advocating for animals, about the importance of insects to biodiversity in our ecosystem. And you can actually go onto our website and flip through their ebook. And I don't know if you can see it, but off to the right, you see the cover of the ebook. And then at the bottom, one of the illustrations, which I'm going to read for you because, like, I was giggling when I saw this, and it says, like, aren't you glad that we have farmland? So that's just one example of the changes that can be made even with such a young group of students. Okay, next slide. Just a few last slides letting you know what our resources look like. If you go to that website, which you don't need to go to because it's in the chat, you can click on that link and you can register for a free account. And this is what you will see. You will see an opportunity to create kind of your own work and create your own plan for your students. And one of the things that you can pick from are our modules or our podcast library. So they're organized into these different categories. You can take a look at the full In the Path of Wildfires podcast that is up there, as well as a number of other environmental issue related podcasts. So there's a couple in there that you can definitely flip through a little bit later on. Go to the next slide. A little bit more about our platform. If your school does want to invest in our learning platform, it gives you the opportunity to kind of create a little mini Google Classroom in a way, where you pick a feel lesson plan, you pick an imagine lesson plan, and so on. And you can do this completely virtually. This works in synchronistic or asynchronistic classrooms. It's accessible through a smartphone or a laptop, and it's completely customizable by educators. So it's kind of plug and play. You want to use the wildfire podcast? Great, plug that in. You want to use one of our other environmental podcasts? Sure, go for that. And you can plug that in and work with your students and hear their responses on the site. One last thing, next slide, is that if you are interested in learning more about our platform, we have 2 professional development workshops. The first one is just a certified educator course where we could come to you either virtually or in person and lead you through the full roadmap of what we do. And the second one is a fully online, self-paced justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion training, or JEDI training, that focuses on our work, especially as it relates to equity and diversity. And then last slide is just how to reach us. And that's it for the Design for Change portion, unless Sanjali, do you want to add anything?
No, I think you did such a great job. I'm really excited to hear what you all think. And I think it just speaks to the fact that there are these really great partnership opportunities out there where our programs really begin to complement work together, which is what we're all about at Design for Change. And I believe TCI is as well. So thank you, Andy, so much for that. And looking forward to hearing any thoughts and questions that bubble up for you all.
And I guess while this is fresh in our mind, are there any immediate questions? All right, well, if you think of any, you can add them to the chat, or we'll have time at the end to go over the questions. So now I'm going to turn it over to Leah. Go ahead, Leah.
Hey, so just really quickly, my name is Leah Lowry. I have probably 27 years of education experience in curriculum writing and all of that kind of jazz, and have been in informal education for the past 13 to 15. And really that's what sparked the Climate Initiative, was some programming that we were doing with high school students that led to real actionable change within a community. So next slide. We decided to start the Climate Initiative right as COVID hit, because that's what you do. And so when we did that, we had to pivot a little bit from what our original thoughts and processes were. And we created something called the Learning Lab. So in just 2 short years, we're in over 47 states with over 25,000 students. Not over, we're in 47 states and over 25,000 students, which is quite a feat during the time that we were trying to do that. You can see on the side, we have our 8 learning labs. Our mission is to empower youth voices for climate action. And we are so beautifully aligned with Design for Change that so much of what we do parallels and intersects, which I think is just wonderful. Essentially what we found was students are completely overwhelmed by the subject of climate change. It is a global issue that they feel they have no agency or no tangible way to make changes. And so Learning Labs was a way to bring a global issue to their local landscape, to connect them to the subject matter and give them a little bit of hope by empowering them to be able to take local actions, to see that they can make a difference and that their voice matters. So we took what we had done in that high school class and kind of narrowed it down to what we call learning labs, which is topical views that are dealing with climate change issues. And it goes through 6 lessons. And it's like a process. So we basically, next slide, take people through educate, empower, and activate. These are our pillars. So much like the pillars that Design for Change has, it's a similar process. We want to make sure that people understand the subject matter. More than 80% of parents in the United States, according to an NPR poll, support teaching climate change. And that support actually crosses political divides, according to these results. But teachers technically, for the most part, don't feel comfortable teaching climate change. They don't feel comfortable in their knowledge base of it. And students, as I said, feel a little bit hopeless. So we're hoping to just give sort of that basic knowledge about one specific subject, and then empower the teachers to be able to bring this in their classroom. And then empower is really about connecting that global issue to a local landscape. And then activate is getting hands-on projects in order to move that forward. Next slide. So ultimately, this is what our curriculum, I just picked one little page out of it. On the left-hand side, you can see what our curriculum might look like. It's all linked to NGSS and the UN Sustainability Goals. I get talking quickly, and basically we go through the 3 lenses, which is what you can see here. We understand that climate change is inextricably linked to social justice. Like, you cannot separate the two. And so what we try to do with every single subject matter is to really look at the socio-cultural effects, the ecological effects, and the economic, because what we do often as science teachers is focus on the ecological and forget the rest. And so we really understand that any sustainable change is only going to happen by really being able to see that holistic picture. And that's what we really work hard with the students to do. We have them collecting data in their local landscapes, looking at their local landscapes for this issue, and then communicating that out to their community. We also have some interactive things online. You can see our Bitmoji classroom there. My much younger looking Bitmoji there in the classroom, but it's an interactive place that students can get onto and click around themselves to learn. Next slide. Like I said, we want to get them out on their local landscape. So each curriculum guide gives you that, or each module gives you the opportunity to see how you can get students out onto their local landscape and doing investigations. Everything is community-based, it's based in real science, equity-based, and we are very, very, very careful in our modules to make sure that it is student-centered and student-driven. We want to make sure that this is empowering their voices and amplifying their voices in action. At the end of the 6 lessons, so we have the science behind, and then we have the case studies, which studies the 3 lenses. We have data collection, and then that is actually has a formative assessment along with it for those of you that are formal educators. Then we have the community, bring it home, which is bringing it to the local landscape, then bring it out, which is bringing it out to the community, doing interviews, community conversations, really bringing the information that the students are learning into the community setting through their voices. And we have learned, as you can see at the picture on the right, we hold something called community conversations, and this is where youth actually lead conversations with community stakeholders. We've learned that they can address issues that we cannot. And so, because even if they are political, they are not seen. If I walk in as political beings, if I walk into a room, you know who I am, what I do for a living, you're going to assume a lot of things about me, including how I think, how I vote, what I do, all those things. And it creates an adversarial situation off the bat. Whereas youth are able to sit down and kind of have some conversations through one of our guides that really starts powerful, meaningful dialogue. Next slide. We understand too that there is not everybody is a formal educator, that we have some teachers that are involved with us that don't have students for multiple days or for long periods of time. And so we wanted to make sure that we had other ways to connect with youth. So we have policy toolkits. And while we are a nonpartisan organization, we also understand that it's imperative for students to understand how to read, write, and advocate for climate-friendly policies. And it's a powerful tool for change. So we have policy toolkits that just kind of gives them the how to understand it. And then eventually we'll have one for each state. Right now we have California, Maine, and Pennsylvania. We also have ambassador toolkits, which are really great for informal educators or for individuals who want to take some kind of small action. It just gives different things that they can do. They are soon going to be renamed the climate action toolkits, but these are things that they could do with a club, a few friends, or on their own, and it leads you through a topic with an action that goes with it. Because we understand ultimately that the ability to move these ideas forward, the ability to take some kind of action is what builds hope. Mobilize is our platform for educators and students to sign up for, to be able to communicate with each other. But I don't want to take any more time because I really, really want Julie to be able to have, to talk about her experience.
Okay, so I'm Julie Ackerman. I have been teaching, I think I'm in my 24th year teaching science. I stopped counting a while ago, but I've always had a passion for earth science. And then as the climate situation developed over time, I felt like there was kind of 2 groups of kids. The first group were of the camp that climate change wasn't happening or humans weren't changing it. And the second camp were just kids that were so defeated by it that they didn't feel like they could do anything about it. So the district that I teach in is a very small rural district that is based on row crops, basically corn and soybeans. And so our entire, the entire economic system of our town is based on the row crops. So it's not necessarily a very easy situation to kind of introduce kids to climate change. And in particular, the renewable energy learning lab, which is what I did, because there's a lot of negative talk around the wind turbines that we have around here. And so I chose to do the renewable energy one just because I felt like it would give me the biggest opportunity for changing attitudes and minds in my district. So I've done a couple different action projects and different learning labs, but the one that I did with my 8th graders was on renewable resources. And we did an action project. They chose to do a vermiculture bin, which is using worms to compost. Okay, you can, next screen. So I attended last year's teachers retreat, and when we were introduced to the learning labs, and as I normally do as an experienced teacher, I come up with reasons why I can't do something right away. Like I try to like look at all the different things that could happen, especially when you have a bunch of 8th graders in your room. The first thing that teachers usually want to make sure is that it hits the standards. Most districts in the US have adopted for the science standards, the next gen science standards or some version of it. And the learning labs cover all of those. So you don't even have to take time to see what's covered in them. It's listed right on the learning labs. The second thing was, and this is a common one that kind of goes along with the standards pieces, sometimes we don't feel like we should take the time to teach it because it is kind of a lengthy thing to do an action project. But because it's based in good science, because there's so much data involved, because it covers the next gen science standards, it really was worth the time that I took to teach it in my classroom. Number 3, I think a lot of teachers don't know enough or think they don't know enough about climate change. I think that the survey that you referenced, Leah, also had a piece in it where many teachers just said, I can't teach it because I don't know enough about it. And the learning labs that has that covered because there's a science piece to it that they begin with that basically tells a teacher everything that they need to know in order to do the learning lab right from the beginning. There's additional resources, so it's quite, it can go in depth, but if you're a teacher that needs to teach something and you need to prep for it, it's really easy to do with the science behind it. I was also a little bit worried that I wouldn't get buy-in from my kids because if you're doing an action project with a number of kids in your room, you want to make sure that it's something that they want to do. And I was super surprised that I mentioned the action project when we started the learning lab, and that inspired the kids to actually listen, pay attention. The group of students that I had were extremely unmotivated students. It's kind of like this group of students that we get that travels together that's kind of a really hard section to teach. There was like 27 boys and 3 girls and a whole bunch of kids that had failed like all their classes the year before. So it was kind of, I was a little bit afraid that I wouldn't get buy-in from the group, but I did. It was great. Having them choose the action project was probably the best thing. So making sure that the kids have a voice in what they're going to be doing, and then have them thinking about it as you go through the science and having them come up with ideas daily or every couple of days about what action project could be done at the end, and then, accumulating a list and having them vote on it. That was really good. And I found that the kids, it was easy for me to keep the kids busy because they were interested in what they were doing. And like, I think someone had mentioned that, the kids, they want to just like rush into something. They chose the action project and they just wanted to make the vermiculture bin. But then we had to talk about everything that we had to do to prepare for it. They didn't know what kind of worms. They didn't know how many worms. They didn't know the cost. We had to do interviews. We had to ask the custodians if they had any issues with it, superintendents, et cetera. And so there was really a lot of background work that they had to do. And that was important for them to see that they couldn't just do it. Like there's a lot that goes into it. And number 6, I wasn't sure if it was worth the possible cost and extra effort that it took me, because it was a little bit of extra effort. I had to make sure that, I brought in power tools on the day we were making the bins, and I had to make sure I had the supplies and, for the bins and all that. But I mean, it was so great to see the kids involved. it made my day a lot easier in the classroom because the kids were so into it. And so, yes, definitely it was worth the time. So this is a picture of some of the kids after we had made the bin. They problem solved everything. Any questions that we thought might be an issue, they made sure that they knew about what we could put into the bins, what we couldn't put in the bins, how much, all that stuff was stuff that they had investigated and researched. So they were really into it. I had this course for the first quarter, but those kids would come and check on the worms like every other day for the entire school year. And when we emptied it, like they wanted to take, it wasn't actually during their class, they would come in during lunch to do that. And these are kids that for the most part are not involved in school at all. I had a little video clip in my other presentation last week where a kid said, I was filming them doing something, and he said, "This is the only reason that I like coming to school." And it was really powerful because that kid was someone that had really bad attendance after he got done with my course. So it was keeping him in school. So yeah, if you want to go into the next screen. This is probably the main takeaway on why it was worth the time, because it did change the attitudes and beliefs of my kids. I did a before and after survey. There were more questions. I had about 10 questions, but these ones were, I think, the most important to me as a science teacher, because I'm pretty good on the climate change science, but I always am wondering if I'm covering the other lenses, like the sociocultural and the economic lenses, that kind of stuff. And these questions kind of stood out to me. One of the questions I asked was, I think that some places on Earth may be impacted by climate change, but places like Minnesota really aren't. And that most of my kids thought that Minnesota was not impacted by climate change at that point. And then afterwards, it was only 6%. The next one, I think that I can personally do something about climate change. That was another one that stuck out to me because most of them were very defeated. I had them give me one word that they thought of when I said the word climate change, and they were all negative. They were like depressed, embarrassed, scared, all that kind of stuff. So for them to feel like they could make a difference after just a couple week action project, that really stood out to me. And then the last thing, I think that some groups of people, like those considered poor or those of a minority, are more impacted by climate change. My kids had never been exposed to that. They had no idea that that's such a big issue with climate change beforehand. And then afterhand, 87% of them had developed that understanding or that belief. So I think that those three questions right there, I was super excited to see that the kids had such a change in attitudes and beliefs after I had done the learning lab. And I want to say also that the learning labs are very easy to modify. That was one of the things I liked about them. I didn't do everything in the learning lab. I did some other stuff that wasn't in the learning lab based on where I felt my kids were at. And it's easy to do. It's not something that you have to do like rote day 1, day 2, day 3, and you could still make it work. So if teachers, for instance, wanted to take 2 weeks or 4 weeks, they can do it. It just means adjusting it a little bit, but it's super easy to work with. That's it.
Thanks so much, Julie. It was very inspiring to hear about the before and after behavior changes and your experience implementing the learning labs in the classroom and how the students received it. It was very well received. Are there any questions for Julie? Or Leah? Any questions for Julie or Leah? Oh, is that a hand? Yes, Sarah?
Yeah, sorry, it's really loud in here. But for your more like informal education programs, like I know most of you are formal educators, but for your like little learning modules, how do you conduct your outreach for that out of curiosity?
I'm not sure I understand what you're asking.
So I'm asking like how you advertise that to individuals who are informally educating people. So like how, for example, how are people finding it? How are they using it? And like how is that being implemented? And how do you figure that out?
Yeah, that is a nut we're still cracking, as they like to say, but we are figuring it out. I mean, the ultimate thing, I come from the land trust world most recently, and so I'm working a lot with land trusts who have a lot of informal educators. So I'm doing that as well as just our general like social media, and they're going to kill me because I forgot to put all of our handles, and Andy was so amazing at that, and I'm terrible at that kind of stuff. But yeah, we do it through social media, through all of our platforms. Our comms team is just crackerjack when it comes to that kind of stuff. We are middle school, high school based. So whereas Design for Change, I think, is a little bit younger than us. And so what I love about the two different organizations is we're hitting kind of across the spectrum, these teachers. And I love that the action projects from Design for Change are so similar to what we're trying to accomplish with middle school and high school. It's like, if we could just get them all doing both of these programs, it's like what change we could make. So really it's word of mouth. I'm sure for them as well, it's the teacher trainings that happen through our regional coordinators and then through our headquarters, like our national teachers retreat. And then, we have stories of change also. So trying to get those stories out off of our website as well.
Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing all your stories, Julie and Leah. I have to go, but it was nice to meet you all and I appreciate it.
And I see there's a comment from the person who's joined by phone that they're facing huge climate crisis, but the grant to carry out the research and tree plantations campaign is the barrier. Yeah, oftentimes it's hard to find funding for these kinds of initiatives. Does anybody have any comments or insight on trying to find funding?
It's been interesting, and I'm sure TCI as an organization, you must have explored this as well, but a lot of efforts are really localized. And so when you reach out to corporations within a particular geographic area that has priorities that are aligned with yours, it's almost easier to get more local funding than it is sometimes to get national funding. And it starts to build up a bit of a momentum when one organization sees another organization contributing to an effort. So it has a bit of a snowball effect. We've also in the past, we don't do it as much anymore, but crowdfunding is people are really concerned about the way our world is going as it concerns climate change. And so there is a power in crowdfunding as well from a social media perspective, but then also just in raising funds for an opportunity. And at times we've had to put that on our students, in addition to all the great work that they were doing, but we also wanted them to take onus of raising the funds and knowing what that meant. So those are a couple of different ways that we've thought about this funding question. Of course, there's a bigger pool of money out there for bigger initiatives, but I think the local ones should not be overlooked.
I just wanted to add that I think that it is an important aspect to get the kids involved if you can. We have a local foundation and my kids helped write the grant proposal for that, for the foundation. And they ended up giving us the money that we needed for our project. But it was important for them to see that there's places out there that all you have to do is ask and have a good plan. And there's places that will give it to you.
I also think just to add on a little bit to what both of you said is I think making sure that students understand the local stakeholders and who really has a stake in what their action project is going to either solve or what it's addressing, because many times, and that's part of why we have regional coordinators, is that idea of how do we connect partners and organizations and create collaborations that are much stronger together. Because I think, you know, Pusha will probably roll her eyes. I say this all the time. It's that we're in this space where we have a short period of time to do a lot of work and there's no room for elbows. We have to really link arms and figure out how to help each other push these things forward. And I think that's part of the beauty of even just this collaboration, as well as others that both of our organizations have. It's all about how do we bring the most voices to the table and all the stakeholders to the table to really find that funding and things like that. And I know we have certain climate action, we have money designated for climate action grants. We have money set aside for teachers a little bit if they decide to do learning labs. We're trying to make it as low barrier as possible. And I know Design for Change is similar in that way. But I think also trying to really seek out who are the stakeholders and connecting them and telling them your story is really a powerful way to move things forward as well. We have to do this together, and including more voices only brings more money, but also more brain power, more energy, and more passion.
Thank you for those awesome insights. Does anybody have any other questions or comments? No more questions, comments? Well, let me,
Yes, I have a question.
yes.
Okay. Good evening all. Because it is evening here in Nigeria. My name is Gali Mansur. I'm a member of TCI, the Climate Initiative here in my country. But in my own country, we are facing a problem of climate change ranging from pollution and drought. But the problem is lack of funding, and the ground will be the barrier. Please, is there any help that you can offer for us in order to achieve our goals? Thank you very much.
You know, if you could share your contact information, since we are a global organization, I'd love to connect you with some of the work that's happening in Nigeria. We have sort of an equivalent chapter over there as well, and they're doing some really great work. And I wonder if there might be some partnership or collaborative opportunities. It was already mentioned that they're when you put some the great minds together and apply for funding collectively, that there's a greater chance, I think, for to receive that funding. So I think that yeah, if you will share your contact information, I'd be happy to put you in touch with our team there.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. See my details on the comment section.
Wonderful, thank you.
Sorry, where can we see your details? Will you put it in the chat?
comment, you said? Oh, I don't. I don't see an email address, but Pooja, I don't know if you could share with me if you have everyone's contact information.
Yeah.
One thing I just, here, I'll just jump in real quick. Because Design for Change is a global organization, if you go to designforchangeworld.org, you can look up different country partners. So I just inserted the Nigeria link, and if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you will see 2 contacts that you can get a hold of and hopefully reach out. Just say you were talking to the Design for Change USA people and they put you into contact with us, and maybe they know a few more local people than we do.
Yeah, thanks, Andy.
Anissa or Dumitru or Maria, any questions? No, all right. Well, thank you everybody for joining. And this was wonderful. We'll make sure to share the recording. Oh, and I see the emails in the chat now. So got his contact information. All right. Thank you, everybody. Be sure to save those links so that you have access to the resources, and you can also access them by visiting our websites. Thank you all very much. Hope you had a great time, and definitely do share with your friends, colleagues. And if you think of any other questions or comments after leaving this, feel welcome to email me. I'll put my email in the chat, and I think Andy will also put his in case you have questions for Design for Change USA. All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.